Yes, folks, it's Thursday, 2 p.m. Pacific. I'm Fred McMurray, which this means something like that. I don't know, long day. This must be...
And here we are.
Hey, happy Friday Eve and happy LGBTQ and Pride Month. This is the first show of June.
It is, and it's a fun month. Very colorful. Time to focus on pride and equality. So, yeah,
excellent.
Annual big post with myself and my son, like I do every year.
Awesome. Well, welcome everybody to another episode of Pillars of Franchising. We have a great show for you today. We've got just a couple of brief word on the street and announcements happening, and then we've got a great lineup today, and we can't wait to get started. Elizabeth, what do you hear today? What's on the street?
Well, we got a couple of words on the street. One is the magazine dropped yesterday, so if you have not had a chance to look at it, the June issue is out. We have Daniel Stein on the cover of Special Strong. It's a great cover photo. I really, really loved it. His story, if you haven't heard it, is an incredibly inspiring one.
Yep.
And if you have any kind of an interest in fitness and in working with special needs humans who benefit so much from his business model and his fitness routines, including getting someone walking who hadn't walked in 7 or 8 years, you need to check that out. It's a great story.
Yeah, he was a great interview as well. And we're going to be airing that. We had kind of a technical hiccup. Wait, was that with him or was that with Ellie?
It was with him. So he's going next week.
Awesome.
We got our technical issues worked out. So if you had intended to watch that the other week, tune in next Thursday, and we'll have a really heartwarming and interesting interview with him.
Yeah, really inspiring. So all of those out there who are thinking, maybe I want to get out of my Joe job, my corporate, ladder job, take a listen to that interview because he was very inspiring, and I think that it will certainly stir your soul. What else do you have, Elizabeth?
Well, and it will, and that actually leads right into one of the things we wanted to talk about quickly today, which was you and I read a report about confidence in U.S. employers dropping.
Yeah.
It's a LinkedIn report that American confidence in employers has suffered the steepest drop that they've had in 2 years.
Yep.
And it has dropped by 28 points on a scale of 100. So interestingly, it kind of feeds right into what we do, which is help people find franchise systems.
Absolutely, yeah. When I read it, I thought, wow, at this point, I didn't know that we could go much lower. And then when I read the report, I thought, holy cow, if there's anything that should make the franchise industry boom, it should be the fact that so many people are so unhappy. And we've talked about it a lot on the show, but it's really kind of one of those weird things because you have everybody thought, as they say in the article, that it was all about pay, and then they realize that that's really not the whole picture.
Yeah, I mean, people want to be treated well. They want to be valued. They want to have more flexibility. COVID has certainly informed us as a country that we can have flexibility and be productive. So there's a lot more to it than just the pay and owning a franchise. So, I mean, tell your audience about your experience with owning and growing your locations, because I think that really speaks to the things that people are looking for.
Yeah, well, I was one of those corporate moms and was trying to just figure out how do you do the big schedule and the travel with 2 kids at the time, right? And it was really just a really bad snowstorm that got me stuck with 2 kids in a van screaming, no dry diapers left, no formula left. And I was like, that's it. I had, I wouldn't say I was even close to where I wanted to be necessarily, in a financial situation in terms of my stock plans and things like that. But I knew that I had enough, I could probably get something started. And I think, especially for women, sometimes it's a matter of thinking like, how am I going to be able to take on this big thing like buying a business and still be the backbone of the family, who has to take care of the kids, who has to do the laundry, who has to clean the house, like all of that stuff, right? It's very overwhelming. And I had just had it to the point where I said, you know what, it doesn't matter. I have to do something. And the great thing when you work with somebody in the industry, call them a consultant, call them a broker, whatever you want to title them, matchmaker, if you will, right, is that they have access to all of these great brands. And so when I work with somebody, the first thing I say is, hey, close your eyes and tell me in 5 or 10 years, what should your life look like? What do you want it to look like, right? Because that's what my broker did with me. And I knew that I wanted to be there for my kids. I knew that I wanted to be more of a room mom, but I also wanted to provide great opportunity for people in the community to grow and to support their own families. And so through a long process, and when I say long, I mean probably 4 to 6 weeks, we were able to nail down some brands. And I didn't pursue it solely for the money. As a matter of fact, the money was kind of like, if I make as much as I did when I left my corporate job, that's fine. I wasn't looking to make in excess necessarily, because for me, it was about quality of life. Yeah. And I think as we all have families and we get older, those are the kinds of tough questions we have to ask ourselves. You know, can I do it comfortably at this level, or do I need to make this amount of money? And what's truly important for me? Yeah. So
I think that's a great point. And so if you were thinking about making a change like that, if you are one of those dissatisfied people with your employers, give us a call, even if it's just for an introductory feeling us out kind of call. Yeah. Or give us an email. Our email is yourdream@pillarsoffranchising.com. Also, feel free to call in during the show to ask questions of our guests or our mentors. The number is 323-580-5755. Next up, we have our first guest. Yay! Hi, Ruth. Welcome to the show.
She's on mute. She's pulling out Elizabeth.
2 years of Zooming and I still never remembered to turn off the...
It's okay. The team has named that after me because I do it all the time. So they say you pulled an Elizabeth, so welcome to my...
Okay. Yes. It's so great to see you again. And as always, as when I first met you in person, your smile lights up the room.
Appreciate that. So good.
Yeah, you too.
So before we start, I want to give everybody a little bit of a background before we jump right into questions. So Ruth Agbaji is the CEO and nerd-in-chief, mama of 2 of CodeWiz. She has many hats as a mother, a working mom, but all of them started when she learned to code. Coding feels to her like her superpower. She taught herself coding when she lived in Nigeria and proceeded to get a master's in computer science from Tufts University and work as a software engineer for tech giants like Microsoft and Kronos. She turned her passion for coding and her desire to create lasting impact into her business, the CodeWiz, a project-driven approach to teaching kids how to code, and now she gets to help kids connect with their inner genius every day. She believes that you can do anything you set your mind to and wants to show that in every part of her business and her life. And I'm so excited to have you here. You've got a great story. You've got a great attitude. And we interviewed you in at the April issue of the magazine and talked so much about all the changes that you've been going through in your business and all the lessons that you've been learning along the way, and the vulnerability you showed to share all of that with us, I think was really, really important, and can be a great lesson for our viewers.
Absolutely. I think it's one of those experiences that, everyone thinks, oh my gosh, it's so great, but there's a lot of underlying emotions, and there's a lot of layers to acquisitions, and I'm always happy to share.
Well, and not even just the acquisition, but so here you are, a mom of 2. I had heard your story about learning to code, but what inspired you to take that into building a business? And then obviously you continued to build, and then you franchised, right? And so where'd you start? Were you feeling that overwhelming feeling when you first got going?
So when I first got going with CodeWiz, with the original location, Well, I was very overwhelmed at work. I was very overwhelmed in the corporate world, and I felt like I had no control over my life. Turns out I'm very high on this scale. I'm a high D, and so lack of control, that really gets to me. And so I really wanted to have control over my life, and I really wanted to be able to see my ideas come to life. And so I was overwhelmed by the fact that I wasn't able to contribute. I was overwhelmed with having two little ones. I was overwhelmed with commute. And so I was like, you know what? I'm okay being overwhelmed as long as I'm getting something out of being overwhelmed. And so starting my business, yes, that was crazy. It was nuts. And again, being a high D, you don't really think through all the details. You're just like, jump on in and we'll figure it out. And so, it's like you jump off the cliff and then halfway down, you're like, oh, okay, so we did that. And so, yes, it was overwhelming, but I was really driven by the fact that I really did want to make a difference. I really did want to take control of my life, and I really needed the flexibility to be there for my family. And so I just, I'm going to figure this out, and figure it out I did.
Well, I think it's very interesting, and I want to make sure that all of our listeners, if you haven't read about Ruth, that you understand that she actually founded, so you are the founding person of CodeWiz. So it really started as an idea and a startup, and you just never stopped. That strong D came through.
Yep. And it hasn't let me down yet.
That's awesome. That's awesome. We have listeners out there who are contemplating, do you start your own business or do you buy a franchise? And so it's interesting to me that you started it and then turned it into a franchise, because that's a big order.
Yeah. And, before I started CodeWiz, I had looked into a different franchise. And, again, true entrepreneur, I don't like some things, so how hard can it be to start my own?
How hard was it?
It's very hard. It's extremely hard. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. And just thinking through, I know that people looking at businesses, a lot of times, because I'm part of the fan dev process for CodeWiz, you see people's in their heads, they're thinking, well, I don't like this aspect of things. Well, have you thought about doing it this way? Have you thought about doing it that way? And I could just see myself on that side of the table. Just you're not really thinking deeply. There's so many layers to starting and running a successful business. And so now I tell folks, my husband who's looking at franchising, I'm like, if you find a franchise brand that you really like, that resonates with you, and just kind of like what you said, having that 5-year plan, it hits all of those things that you want for yourself, just go for it. If you're super entrepreneurial, go find an emerging brand. They'd love to have you.
Yes.
But, make sure you explore all the options before going through the pain of starting your own, because it really is a lot. It takes a lot to make it successful.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. So how many years were you in as CodeWiz before you started duplicating and then transitioning to a franchisor?
It was very early. In retrospect, life happened. Well, I can tell you what happened. So life happened. I was not planning to be a franchisor. My plan was to just have 5 corporate locations. That to me was a big, hairy, audacious goal at the time. But 3 months into starting the business, my son was diagnosed to be on the spectrum, and that is life-changing. It becomes a full-time job just to get him from one therapy to another and all of that. And so I knew at that point that having 5 corporate locations would be challenging, because my goal was 5 corporate locations year after year. So I wasn't going to space them out. And so I knew it would be challenging. But my mind had latched onto that goal of having multiple locations. And so I was like, okay, well, if I can't do it myself, is there a way to bring in other people and we could do this together. And so I started to think about franchising. And so we started offering franchise opportunities in 2019. So I started thinking about it about a year or so after we opened, and then we officially started offering in 2019.
Awesome. So I'm sure developing those during COVID was a lot of fun. I mean, it's like just when you overcome, right? You just get to where you want to be, and then here we go.
Like boom! Oh man, no, it was rough. I often think of myself as somebody who is just resilience, just coming through, having the background that I have, where I grew up, and all of that. I think of myself as being mentally strong, but boy, did COVID test the limits of that strength. There were times where I just wanted to throw in the towel and just be done. And I was like, nobody would blame you. Businesses are dying left, right, center. No, it will be fine. But interestingly enough, what kept me going was the parents' feedback to us. The parents were saying, thank you so much for keeping CodeWiz going, because that's the only thing in my child's life that isn't changing. This is the only thing they look forward to. School has become awful. Everything around it, they can't talk with their friends, they can't do anything. But CodeWiz is the one thing that has remained constant. Thank you for doing that. And I'm like, okay, great. Now I gotta keep going. Okay.
All these children's happiness rests solely on your shoulders.
Yeah, exactly. And I take that very seriously. So like, okay, I'm gonna keep going. And I'm so glad that we did. I really am. COVID wreaked a lot of havoc on many people's lives and businesses, but there were some silver linings, and for us, we had some silver linings. Just transitioning to online classes really opened the door to a lot more opportunities to impact kids around the globe. We had Belgium at the time, from Nigeria, from Canada, Switzerland. It was pretty special. And it was being online, being able to pivot successfully to online classes that then put us on the radar of Tutor Doctor. So it really was a blessing in that way.
Yeah, so, and when you say put you on the radar for Tutor Doctor, Elizabeth, you want to kind of take it from there? Because that's the next step, right?
Yeah, so one of the things we talked about in the article that I really enjoyed hearing about was the way that you viewed scaling before the acquisition, and then the way that you grew to understand it afterward, and the fear that you felt through that transition, and not wanting to grow too quickly as a single franchisor, but now having the support and the opportunity, and how do you make that transition in your mind and lead through it. So if you want to talk about that a little bit, I think it's such an interesting evolution in your brain. And you talked about that all the emotions of change in terms of blind optimism, and then pessimism, and then all of the emotions that go through that. So tell us a little bit about that journey, because you're very articulate at telling us what that felt like.
Oh no! Don't tell me.
Well, she's not right. There you are.
I thought she was just trying to digest that whole question.
You're such a process.
That was a loaded question.
Yeah, it's been a year, a little over a year now, and everybody often asks me, if you were going to do this again, if you know what you know now, would you do it again? And for me, the answer is an absolute yes. I knew that, once I started franchising, I knew that I had something in my hands that was special. I just knew it, and I was like, whoa, I was not prepared for this kind of response. And I am very think in the article I said I have a sensitive conscience, and so I really do, and I really want everyone to do well. I am probably one of those people guilty of, let all the kids have a trophy so that everyone's happy. I know, which actually, interestingly enough, that doesn't really align with my deep personality, but I really want everyone to be happy. And so even for franchisees, I really want them to be successful. And I think having been a founder where we had a second mortgage in our home to be able to fund the initial business, understanding that, money is, for most people, money is not just something that they just have. And there's a lot of sacrifice that comes with starting your own business. Having that background, in my mind, I just want people to be successful. And so understanding I wanted people to be successful and understanding what it would take to get franchisees to be successful, I knew that I really needed to get a strategic partner to help me with the growth part of the business.
Right.
When it comes to vision and mission, I got that covered. I know where we're going. I just need a bus. And so when the opportunity came for them to acquire us, I was like, yeah, this is great, because they figured out franchising.
Right.
And just take my vision, the model that I've worked so hard on, and kind of plug it into the franchising bus, so to speak. And so I don't have to make mistakes with my franchisees. I can learn everything that they've learned the hard way and give that to the franchisees so they can be successful. So that was the whole idea. I was very excited by it. And I think one of the things I was concerned about was losing control.
I was going to ask that.
I was like, man, I don't really know with managers. This is going to be tough.
Yeah.
But, I love CSG. I love Tutor Doctor. One of the things that we did up front was, what are the two things, what we believe is that there are three things a franchisor needs to be really good at. You need to be good at fran dev, you need to be good at operations, and you need to be good at innovation. And typically, people are good at 2 out of the 3. So we had a lot of conversations around, what 2 things do you want to keep? And we can let you just go to town on those 2 things.
And what did you choose? I'm dying to know. I'm guessing, but I want to know what you choose.
So I chose innovation and operations in the beginning. And then I got it, and I'm like, whoa, is this what operations is? I'm going to take fran dev.
Yep.
So I took fran dev and innovation, and it's been so great because we just take everything Tutor Doctor has figured out on the operations side, and it's also directly applicable. But so anyways, that was my mindset. I was like, oh, this is gonna be great, it's gonna be exciting, they're giving me these 2 areas, I'm all good, my control issues will be under control.
And then what happened, Ruth? Something had to have happened. It's not all roses and sunshine.
I'm leading up to something.
Yes.
It was great. Like, everybody did their best, but the truth is, you now have other voices in the room and people that have opinions. And now all of a sudden, it's like somebody's telling you that you're putting your baby's diaper on wrong. I think of COVID as my 3rd child. I'm like, I know what I'm talking about. This is my baby.
Right.
And it took a while for me to be like, all right, Ruth, this feelings of invasion, I was feeling invaded.
Yeah.
Feelings of invasion is normal. This is you've spent countless hours, years, you're building this, you care about it, so it is normal, but just remember the why. You have to remember why you did this.
Yeah.
And why was, so that you could grow and you could grow successfully. If you don't allow people in, if you stay closed off and don't stay open to people's opinions and suggestions And third-party perspective is great. We as humans just have so many blind spots, and we don't realize that. And so somebody coming in with so much franchising experience and just not even knowing the business well is able to see things that you can't. And so I had to have this, conversation with myself. Is you have to remember the why, and it's going to be painful for a little bit because they're going to take it apart to some extent and put it back together so we can really scale. You build, like I was telling myself, that I build a prototype, right? But if that prototype is going to be mass produced, there's going to be some tweaks to it. And so that's kind of like the conversation that I had with myself. And I just had to remind myself, you have to stay humble. You have to stay humble. Ego is an awful thing if you let it get in the way. If you're not open to learning and you're not open to feedback, you're not going to make it. And so that's a conversation I had with myself. And it really has been super helpful because I'm just like, all right, everybody, this is what we have. Let us know what areas of improvement we can make. And because I had that mindset, it has really made a huge impact on our current franchisees and even the new franchisees that are coming in. I really believe that we are at least 5 years ahead of where we have been if we were on our own.
So that's a great jumping up point. How many franchisees do you have right now?
Right now we have roughly off the top of 10, I think. Okay. With 14 locations across the 10 of them.
Well, I think, one of the best compliments you could ever get as someone who formed a business is to get a franchise organization to come in and want to buy you. I mean, that is such an amazing compliment to you and everything you've accomplished. And I'm super excited to know that you are still considered then to be an emerging brand because there's nowhere for you to go, honey, but up. And who doesn't love kids being happy and learning and have a place to take them where they can, pull out their creative side. And I mean, I just think since the time I met you and we started talking, I was like, wow, what a great business model. What a great idea. And so I'm really excited to see where CodeWiz goes from here. Now, if our folks out there are looking to get involved with the CodeWiz, where do you suggest they find you or the rest of the development team?
I spent way too much time on LinkedIn. So that's probably first. And LinkedIn is a good place to sort of feel out who we are, what we are. I like to share a lot about our brand, our mission, our vision, who we're looking for. But you can also check out our website, franchising.com. That has a ton of information as well. And when you feel ready, I don't want to attack you, but when you feel ready, you can email me at ruth@thecodewiz.com, and I'd be more than happy to have a conversation.
I think that's awesome. I'm so very excited for you and for the whole team now. And I wanted to make sure that, our doors, our cameras are always open. We would love to continue this journey with you as you grow. And I know that as a member of Franchise Brokers Association, they work really hard at making sure the emerging brands and the existing brands are really top-notch, good quality franchises to buy. So, for our listeners out there, if you're thinking about a brand that is into kids and some kind of science, coding, technology type thing, STEM, let's just call it, I think this is a really great opportunity. Ruth, thank you so much for sharing your amazing story, and all of your contact information can be also found on pillarsoffranchising.com. Can you tell us very quickly, because I'm remiss in asking you, what type of investment are you looking for from somebody who might want to buy a CodeWiz?
So it ranges between $120,000 to $199,000. But right where in the middle is what people would look to spend.
Okay, and is that include all inclusive of build outs and
everything? Yes, all inclusive of the franchise fee, build out, and working capital.
Awesome. Sounds very reasonable. Might have to check on that, Jerry, my partner there. We have to look that up. So thank you again, Ruth. We're so pleased to have you on the show. And again, check out Code Whiz for all of the exciting information that Ruth has to offer.
Thank you for having me.
Anytime.
Hey, franchise owners, how's your local marketing? Do you feel like you could use some help keeping up with your social media posts and comments and reviews? Do you wonder if you could be doing more to attract local customers? Are you able to identify new movements to your local area? At Westbine, we help franchisees like you reach more local customers through digital marketing. With daily monitoring, creating content, ad placement, and customer data intelligence, we'll get your business in front of the people who want your products or services. We also work with franchisors who need an agency to handle the digital marketing for all of their locations. If you're ready to reach more local customers, give us a call at 805-265-5440 or visit us at westbine.com. That's 805-265-5440 or westbine.com.
Jerry, you're back.
I'm back. Did I go somewhere?
Well, I don't think, were you with us last week? It doesn't seem like you were. How were you?
It all runs together.
You know, sometimes I see you in a truck, sometimes I see you in the trees, occasionally you're in an office.
Not very often in an office, Kristin. I got to be honest with you. I spend most of my life on the road anymore. You know, when you run the crowd that I do, trying to build businesses and help franchisees and work with franchisors and so on, it is a busy time.
Yeah. How about our interview with Miss Ruth? I just think she's so fabulous.
I met her at IFA, I think probably about the same time you did at the convention, and she blew me away there. And this interview was life-changing, it should be for a lot of people that listen to her out there. So I learned a lot from her, and I'm really excited about what she's doing. And man, the sky's the limit, I think, for her and Code Whiz and everything else they're involved in.
Yeah, I mean, could you tell me a little bit about, I know we've touched on it before, but, some of these emerging brands really pique my interest because, as we talked before, there's so much, I'm going to call it latitude, to get involved in some of the decisions that are made moving forward and really forming the franchise of the future.
I think the best way to look at emerging brands is there are good things and bad things about them, and the bad things are not terrible. They're just things to be aware of and be prepared to deal with. And then as someone coming into this, if you understand that, you're right, there are a lot of really powerful reasons why you should consider an emerging brand. One of them would be, as you named, you can be involved in the growth of it. You can actually help guide them through the learning process and some things, because they need to learn what it's like in the field. Now, Ruth ran her own, but the people who bought her out, they maybe have never been franchisees before, and there's only so much Ruth to go around. So I think that's a very powerful thing. There is a sense of pride that goes with working with an emerging brand that maybe you don't get quite as much of when it's an old standing brand that's big and just kind of on autopilot. I really love emerging brands. Many times you get into them for a little less money. I mean, Ruth's number was very inexpensive, I thought, so I'm quite pleased with that. How many times as a potential franchisee, when you call the franchisor, do you get to talk to the founder of the company? And learn what it was like to actually start that up and what to look out for and things like that. So I want everybody to understand, you need to understand there's two sides to that emerging brand thing. Most of it is positive. The things, and I'm not saying there's negative, there's things you just need to be aware of. They will likely not have as much structure to support franchisees as a larger, older brand. So they have to help them develop some of that, right? They may not have, and I always call them the VPs of everything, vice presidents of everything, because, when you're with a larger brand, you got a vice president of facilities and marketing and real estate and yada, yada, yada. And most emerging brands have like one or maybe two people doing all of those things. So again, that's a good news, bad news thing, right? The downside of that is, there's only so much of them to go around. It takes a little time to get answers maybe sometimes. The upside is you're dealing with the person. And the person does it. And in my old coaching days, I used a couple acronyms, and I think it's perfect for this. In fact, almost spot on. We always look for the man, and that stands for money, authority, and need. And in this case, I look for the woman. We're all money, authority, and need. Because in this case, I think that would be perfect. You're going to talk to the people that are actually making the changes and the decisions, and you can implement something of your own.
Yep. I really, I've talked to a couple of emerging brands over the last couple of weeks, and I will say the one thing I really enjoy when you get to meet with the founders is no one can paint what their vision is or was when they started like they can. And you won't find another person in the entire organization that believes in it more, that really, at my corporate job, we used to say, oh, we bleed orange, right? Because that was the company color. But I mean, in this case, she bleeds Code Whiz, right? And I just think that there's something so inspiring, and it really gets people engaged and excited to get going,
I found it interesting, the comment that I made a note about and I found really enlightening was that, the control that she had to give up when she sold, and that she had to choose two things out of the three, right? And then she changed her mind on them, and interestingly enough, that's exactly what happens to franchisees too, because when you buy a franchise system, you cannot be all things to all people. So there's going to be things that are within your sphere of influence, your comfort zone, your expertise, those kinds of things. And other things, you just have to hire somebody to do or farm it out to a third party or something like that. And so many franchisees try to do everything and generally fail at everything because they can't give up control on two or three things. So I think what she learned in that process is also very pertinent for franchisees coming into this thing.
Yeah. What did you think about, I think it was really great that she knew going in that she was a type B personality, right? So for her, she cared enough to identify what type of a person, what type of a leader was she. And I think, to me, that's very important. I took I'm going to call it a survey, a profile or whatever. When I got started in my business too, I had done one in my corporate job just a few months prior. I did another one going in when we were looking for franchises to really help guide me in not just what my strengths and blind spots were, but it kind of guided me to what type of company and then what type of people I needed to hire so that we had a real complete circle in terms of the right mix and such.
Well, I tell you, I think everybody thinking about trying to get into a leadership role or become a franchisee or anything like that should do a DISC profile or one of the other versions of that and learn more about themselves before they really go into it. For me, I've always considered myself a leader. I don't know if I am or not, but I've always considered myself a leader. And most of my friends who have watched me over the years would say that I just am somewhat charismatic and take control, take charge, and those kinds of things. It's, follow me and we'll take the hill kind of thing. But interesting, when you take a DISC profile or one of the versions of it, you learn your blind spots, as you said. And I think it's important to note that people who are take charge, charismatic types of people tend to have a lot of blind spots, and when they're blind, they are totally black. You can't see them, you don't think you have blind spots, and so for people, I'm going to say like me, or others similar, we almost need it more than other people do because we assume we don't have them. And when you're managing people, and that's what you touched on, Kristin, when you're managing people, you cannot manage them all the same. And if you understand the places where you are blind and might struggle and you run into an issue where you can't get on the same page with an employee, it's almost always because of that blind spot. And if you recognize that and you start getting into that situation, you change the way you approach it, or frankly, you farm it out. If you've got an operations manager, or somebody in another position within your company that can handle that situation that more matches the personality or the understanding of that employee, be prepared to pass that off. Also prepare the person you're passing it off to before you actually pass it off, because they may not be ready for it either. But the fact is, once you understand how you're wired, it makes it much easier to manage people and grow. And you could become an impediment to the growth of your organization because of your blind spot. So recognize it and do something about it.
Yeah, I think that's very good advice. I mean, I will, full disclosure, say that I am one of those that runs, I have the vision and I run full on, crazy to the wall, but if you want me to do like deep dives in data, yeah, that's not like analysis. I'm not so sure. I've got the ideas. I know where I want to go. So I'm like the D, moving straight ahead enthusiastically, getting everybody cheered up around me, right into whatever it happens to be. But so those are certainly valuable. I really appreciate you sharing your thoughts on that.
Well, and always, anytime, I love helping potential franchisees and even franchisors in this case. And before Fred sticks his head into this, we have to understand that it's that time of the show where we have to talk about timing for buying a franchise. Is this a good time? And, this starts getting repetitive after a while, but I will change when the times change. The fact is, this is a spectacular time to get into franchising. With the transference of employees and employers and people going different directions. It's amazing. As we talk about, there's lots of money to be loaned against franchise systems because the franchise systems were so strong during COVID and all those kinds of things. So if you're thinking about making a change, now is maybe the best time in history. The last thing I will say is one of the reasons it's the best time is because you got lots of people like us on Pillars who would love to help support you on that journey. So with that, Kristin, I'll turn it back to you.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Jerry. We can't wait to see you next week. Along with that, obviously, we do offer those surveys, and there's a lot of them out there online that people can take a look at if you choose to. Elizabeth, I think we're going to switch it over.
As usual, thank you for joining Pillars of Franchising. We appreciate every single one of you. We want to give a shout out to our sponsors. The Titus Center for Franchising at Palm Beach Atlantic University. You can find them on the college's website. Also, Franchise Show 247, which can be found at franchiseshow247.com. And we couldn't do without our sponsors, and we appreciate their support. Don't forget, we'd love to have calling guests. Our number to call in is 323-580-5755. That is 323-580-5755. If you have questions for our guests or for any of our $1 Million mentors, we welcome you to call in at any time on the show. We will do our very best to answer your calls. Stay tuned. More coming up.
Hi, Maura. How are you?
Doing really well. How are you? It's been a great show so far.
It has, and we're going to come back to you as soon as Andrea and I are done chatting.
Awesome.
That was a sneak peek at our next guest, and right now, however, we have the fabulous Andrea Mundy. How are you, Andrea?
I'm great, thank you. How are you?
Oh, good. We're so excited to have you back on the show. And who better to tie on to Ruth's interview talking about building a brand to franchise? Tell us a little bit about all of that you had to endure, if that's the right word, as you grew your brand through all these different stages, as Ruth has just finished doing.
Well, it's so interesting hearing her talk because what I was thinking about when she talked about the stage she was at in terms of having only really operated her own locations for a brief period of time. My experience was very different. I had operated my own businesses for so many years. So I actually think where she started franchising in terms of really being able to quickly and nimbly refine the model to make sure that the unit economics made sense more quickly as a franchisee, made it a little bit easier in many ways. When you have a lot of operating history with a lot of different twists and turns, there's just a lot of explanation, and there's certainly positives in that because you have a lot of experience in why certain things worked or didn't work. But I think, if I could start all over again, and now I work with brands, to support them in getting themselves ready for franchising. In many ways, if you can come out of the gates with just really powerful unit economics and a model that works, and you put a lot of thought into building your business for franchising instead of creating a business and then making a decision to grow by franchising because somebody wants to do what you're doing, I think you're in a far better place. And I thought a lot about Jerry, what you were talking about with the access to the founder and how as an emerging brand, there are a lot of benefits to working with a founder. And I think Ruth said that, if you're entrepreneurial, find an emerging brand. And I loved that because that's definitely the kind of franchisee that needs to work with an emerging brand. Yeah. But on the other hand, it's very difficult to make that transition to having an acquisition when you have the founder as sort of that point person for the franchisees, and that was definitely my experience. And there was a lot of management of different ways that people handled that transition. And with the company that I don't own anymore, but that I did own, when we partnered with Frameworth, there was tremendous benefits to the franchisees. And I think Jerry, you said, the VP of this, the VP of that there's so much value in having a parent company with just that knowledge base that you don't have, or the resources that you don't have as an emerging brand that you can tap into. And there's so many best practices in franchising that we know, you don't need to reinvent the wheel. And I think that there's a nice balance when you have a situation where you have an emerging brand working with a more established parent company, because as long as that franchisor, the founder is willing to listen and, take the lead in some of the areas that they don't have the experience, I think it can work really well. But that being said, there are so many different stakeholders that need to be managed in terms of that transition. And
how do you go about doing that? I mean, that's a tall order.
Yeah. Well, what I would do differently now is, I love the concept of being a little bit more proactive in anticipating what those responses will be. And I'm working a bit with a brand now, getting ready for franchising here in Canada, and they do a lot with the various colors and how those personalities actually work well together. And that's really at the unit level. But I think there's a ton of value in looking at whether or not those personalities are going to probably accept the change in sort of relative short order, or what those hang-ups or challenges might be. And I definitely lean on that, because I can tell you the mistake I made is I will always look for, I've got rose-colored glasses on every day of the week. Like, I am the eternal optimist, and that's just who I am. But that can be very, very annoying to people who need more time to sit with the possibility of what if something doesn't work the way it's supposed to. Right. I don't need a lot of time there, but a lot of people do. And in my system, half of us loved that idea of working with a partner. The other half were terrified about, well, what does this mean for me? Even suppliers. Suppliers, it's a risk to them, because they don't know whether or not their contracts are going to continue. And so I think the best way to manage it is, what I would do differently is learn more about the different proactive and understanding that before a transition gets made. And I think also providing as much transparency in terms of what to expect as you can, including being clear on not knowing what will happen in some cases, and being okay to admit that. Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. I have a question from the audience from Northern California. Thank you for chatting in our chat square here. What should an emerging brand focus on when there are 5 to 10 locations? What's their next step?
Viability of the model. You know, making sure that model actually makes sense. Pressure testing it with a royalty and a brand fund built in. Very different to have a corporate run model and a franchise model. So making sure that you know, the margins work with all of those built into it. If you're already a franchise system, so you've already started franchising and you're at 5 to 10 units, and that can be a really tricky place to be, because that's when you've got a lot of different people involved, but you're still emerging. And at that point, consistency is really important. Making sure brand consistency, you know, across the different territories is not something you let go of, because as soon as that disappears, I don't know what you're franchising anymore. Now you're just opening more locations that have potentially very different ways of conducting themselves, and the brand equity can fall very, very quickly. So having a system that you can leverage to manage all of that is critical if you don't already have it as a franchisor at that stage.
Well, Andrea, we so appreciate your feedback. I'm so glad to have you as part of our regular guests and now kind of co-host too, because you'll be asking a lot of the questions. So welcome to our franchise family here. I really love the story that you have and your willingness to share some of your experience. So thank you so much, and we're looking forward to seeing you again the next time you're on.
Thank you.
I am Elizabeth Dunham, the Chief Content Officer for Pillars of Franchising, and I'm telling you that because I am always looking for people with a great story in the franchising space. If you have a great story that you would like to share either in the magazine or on the show, you can fill out our contact form on pillarsoffranchising.com. Also, while you're there, be sure to subscribe to the magazine. You can choose all of the services that you might be interested in if you're looking to buy a franchise, sell a franchise, become a franchise, if you need mentorship, and if you need to get the word out for a business, we have a lot of variety of sponsorships for you. So be sure to visit our website, like, subscribe, and share this show. And we appreciate every comment and every engagement that you offer. So be sure to visit our website at pillarsoffranchising.com.
And welcome back to the show. Hi, Laura. Liz, how are you?
Doing well. How are you?
Great. We're so excited to have you on today. For those of you who do not know Laura, she is our franchise attorney expert who contributes to the show every week, and as well to the digital magazine. So anything and everything legal and franchising, that's pretty much your whole scene, right?
You're right. That is my scene. I live at the intersection of all things franchising. So it's always fun to be here with everyone.
Excellent. So let's talk a little bit about all this growing and merging and franchising, and holy smokes, we've got a lot going on in this episode today. So when do you start? What's the timing? Let's say you're looking to negotiate with a franchisor and you want to expand your business. How do you go about that?
Sure. So, in your example, maybe you're saying that like if someone already has one location and they're thinking that it's time to go and they want to do more. Some of the really important things is, just to think about, okay, like what kind of growth are you ready for? You might think you want to go to 5 outlets or 10 outlets, whatever it is, you love the business that you have, but that doesn't happen in a year, typically. No. Right? It doesn't happen even in 3 years. For a lot of locations, a lot of brands. And so I think that it's something to really evaluate, what is going to be the timing of what you can realistically, successfully do. If it took, your all to do the first location really well. And of course, you want each next location to also do well. Presumably, you won't have the same learning curve, but no two stores are exactly the same. There's always going to be some little nuance that's different at the next location. So, it's important to think about what kind of schedule. That's one of the biggest things that I encourage my multi-unit clients to think about is what kind of schedule is viable. And frequently, go ahead.
I'm sorry, but the first question I would ask about a schedule is then, when do I get my franchise attorney like yourself involved?
Yeah.
Do I do it when I'm mulling it over? Do I do it when I'm ready to sign paperwork? What is that?
That's a good question. We encourage, for people who already own one location, they have a lot of knowledge about what's going on in the brand. And so frequently, they will be presented with the new franchise disclosure document. So if they signed and opened like 3 years ago, that document will have at least somewhat changed every year since then. And so it is a good idea to have an attorney at least see what's changed. Because there may be new obligations in there that as an existing operator, you're not really subject to, but they're going to be something that you have to comply with going forward. So that's important. And then I think, before you're ready to sign, when you're still having discussions and you're entertaining the idea, that's when you want to start thinking about, speaking with your attorney, thinking about structuring, thinking about, it is everything all at once. Right? I hate to say that, but it is everything all at once, right? It's talking to your lawyer about how to restructure. It's talking to, whoever your lender may be, your finance team about, okay, how am I going to afford to do this? What's realistic? What can I get financed for? And also, then bringing all of that knowledge to the franchisor and saying, okay, I want to do 3, and here's how I'm going to do it.
Right. Well, and I think that's really interesting because, if you look at the way, and I'll speak to Jerry's experience a little bit, he often at times now that he has such a large corporation, he can buy 5 packs, right? And he expands that way. I started expanding, my second year in business, and but I go one at a time. And I kind of have the slow, methodical approach because of the type of business I have. And so I think, the one thing I never did is I didn't really partner with a lawyer to say, hey, is this contract really that different? And I'll tell you, I must have really lucked out because what wound up happening on at least one of those is that they said, okay, yes, here we're approving you to buy it, but now they're both going to be under this one contract.
Oh, wow, that is interesting, yeah.
So we merged the 2 locations into one FDD, and now this last one that I bought had all kinds of interesting fun things in it that my initial never had, right? So, and I think that's a really good lesson for people to don't just think that you're going to roll in another location and everything's going to be the same. Because they change yearly, right?
It changes yearly, typically. That's like the most amount of time that it would go between changes. I mean, it could change more often, but they try not to do that typically.
Yeah.
But yeah, I know brands that have made big changes between, year to year, and sometimes, you wonder, like, oh, should I have done some kind of development agreement, which means that you have a plan, you're already committed to doing, what you're referring to as like a 5-pack, meaning you're going to do 5 locations, or I'm going to do 3, or whatever it is, and, locked in. But even those nowadays, typically, you sign whatever franchise agreement is available at the time that you are ready to open that next store. So it may not even, prevent that. You can negotiate some things like the schedule. Sometimes depending on the size of the brand, right? This is an interesting point because we've been talking about franchisors that are growing and scaling. And now we're talking about, franchisees that are growing and scaling. And with the franchisors that are growing and scaling, they tend to be a little bit hungrier, right? They're more willing to negotiate because they really want to get their system growing.
Right.
And that gives the franchisees more leverage to be able to ask for changes, frankly. You're never going to walk into, even Jerry, having lots and lots of stores, you're probably not negotiating much of anything. You're just buying the next 5. Versus new one you are negotiating.
Yeah, I found it really interesting. I was helping somebody research some franchises out in California, and I won't disclose the brand, but it was one of those in which you defined your territory by household count, and by household count they meant value of the home, income level. Those were kind of the two cores. And when they first gave him the FDD, he called and said, "Hey, Kristin, can you help me understand this? This is what they consider to be a qualified household." And I started laughing, and I'm like, so here's the thing, like $80,000 in California as considering to be a qualified income. Those people, they don't get maid service. Those people are still probably living in an apartment because they can't afford a house. And then, when they said, oh, and the qualified income for household value is $300,000. Okay, well, you're talking about a one-bedroom condo in LA, right? So what was interesting is that without a lawyer, he went to them and said, well, these are nonsense. These don't qualify here, especially in my county. And they're like, oh, okay, well, what if we did this for you? And I said, so that's interesting how quickly they did that. Maybe you should ask them. Was recommended in their paperwork, change the household value and what they consider to be, the qualified income level.
Wow.
And then I got really nervous. I thought, if they're willing to do all of that, and you've asked as a person without a lawyer, there's probably some things going on in that franchise system that we're going to uncover that we're not going to like.
And that may or may not be the case. I wouldn't take a willingness to negotiate as a symptom of anything bad. Being hungry, as I kind of call it, isn't a bad thing. Especially because those are things that are typically like fill in the blank provisions, right? If I get in and I start negotiating on things that are just, like, okay, well, what's this fee? And then we start, that's a more substantial or meaningful negotiation, because it's not something that was ever like left to be defined at the time of signing.
Aha, that's a very good point. Okay, good. So if anybody's done that, it's a really good learning point that's not necessarily a deal killer.
You should always be pushing for, the biggest amount of territory or households or population, whatever the metric is that they're trying to use in that particular system. As a franchisee, you always want the most you can get, right? You always want that. Unless you have minimum, the risk there is if you have minimum performance requirements. Some brands do have those where, okay, if, by every 10,000 people, you have to have more and more sales, otherwise you have to pay a penalty, essentially, if you don't achieve that. So that is something to be aware of, but they would disclose it if they had that.
Well, Laura, thank you again so much for your expertise in this area. I always feel like every week we get started and we just get the tip of the iceberg, and there are so many deep dives we could do on this stuff. But we're excited to have you back this week. We can't wait to see you again, hopefully next week or the week after, whatever your schedule allows. And just a reminder to everybody out there who is considering buying a franchise, please don't be remiss. Don't make the same mistakes I certainly did, which was to get the wrong lawyer, or even worse, to not get a lawyer at all, because they are your eyes and ears, and really, they are the ones protecting you from making a dire mistake. So, and with that, we'd like to do a wrap up. I would like to thank all of you for joining us on the show today with our guest, Ruth Agbaji. Okay, I'm going to say it right. Agbaji. Okay, I probably said it wrong again, Ruth, and I'm sorry, I just can't get it out. Of Code Whiz. Please be sure to like, share, and comment on this episode. Thank you to Jerry Akers, our $1 Million Mentor, for his insight and wisdom. Laura Liss, our franchise attorney, and contributors, Andrea Mundy. And I'm sorry we missed our other contributor today. He was not feeling well. So thanks to Elizabeth Dunham, Fred McMurray, our producers. I'm Kristin Selmeczy, your $1 Million Mentor, and together we are your resource for franchising success. This has been the Pillars of Franchising, and remember, your dream starts here.
Wow, wow.